This is Distant Replay, the podcast that goes back in time to relive all the greatest events that we witnessed in sports. From upsets, to championships, to cultural moments, we discuss it all. Coming up on today's episode.
They're approaching the top of the straightaway. Michael Johnson reaching deep. He has the lead, but Fredericks is still there and solves that all moment. But Michael Johnson has dead aim on the finish. Michael Johnson running for the road and into Olympic history. A new world record. He set a world record. He destroys his old record.
Taking you back to the summer of 1996. It was the Olympics in Atlanta, a time that we grew up and remembered, Mike. This was right when we were about to get our car, about to start driving. We were in early high school, and this Olympics really kind of caught everybody's attention because it was close to us. Did you have any events that were close to you up in the Northeast? I don't remember the locations.
No, I don't believe so. The closest thing we ever had up to here for an international competition was the World Cup in '94.
Right.
They had games at I think they had games at Foxborough and they had games at the Meadowlands.
Well, I know most events were obviously in Atlanta. That was the host, but I know Birmingham hosted a couple of soccer matches. So I don't know. I don't remember how far they got away from Atlanta, but that was the site of the event, and that is the focus of our event tonight. It is Michael Johnson, his historic 2 races, 2 gold medals in those '96 Olympics. The hometown, the American man who really became the fastest man in the world. Really kind of, he didn't put track and field on the map because Carl Lewis, and there were some great American runners through the years, but he was a guy that really became popular, I think, in pop, at least from a pop culture perspective, Mike, I think more than maybe any other runner before his time. Is that fair?
I think since Carl Lewis, he was the most high profile one.
Yeah. I
think that's fair to say. When I think of U.S. track and field, I think of Carl Lewis, Michael Johnson, and drugs. So seriously, I mean, not drugs, but steroids, whatever you want to call it, performance enhancing drugs. That's what I think of.
That's hilarious. You don't
and
think of Jackie
Usain Bolt, and Usain Bolt, but he's not American.
Right. Jackie Joyner-Kersee. You probably think of her as well. She was.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Drugs.
Flojo.
You caught me off guard on that one.
Yeah.
Well, look.
I can't wait. I wish I could go inside your mind and you trying to think like who the third one was going to be.
No, I had no idea. That's the plan tonight. We're going to put these up on our website too, distantreplaypodcast.com. If you want to watch those 2 races, they're short, so this episode will be a little bit shorter than normal, but we'll take you back to those 2 nights. July 29th was the 400-meter. August 1st was the 200-meter, and Johnson was trying to win both for the first time. No athlete had ever won both of those events in a single Olympics, and he was trying to do it for the first time. Also, find us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube as well. We put every video up or every show up on YouTube, so make sure you find us there as well. I think, Mike, before we even get into Michael, I think the biggest thing to kind of think about it, and I wasn't thinking about it as much until you brought it to my attention, but this was just a few days or just a short time after the bombing happened in Centennial Park.
So the Centennial Park, to put in perspective for everyone, the Centennial Park bombing happened on July 27th. These 2 races, the 400 meters is on July 29th, and the 200 meters is on August 1st. So one thing, though, Ben, I wanted to ask you is, obviously that bombing was a huge deal, but I don't remember it really taking a lot of attention away from the Olympics itself and the competition. Do I have that right?
I think so. I believe so. I mean, I think it was always kind of a story, but yeah, I mean, I don't remember that. Like, I just remember that bombing happening. I remember the coverage of it, but I don't, like the rest of the Olympics watching it, I don't remember that being a big story.
Exactly. And, in the coming months, coming weeks, months, and even years after that, that story would morph into something, right, and have a life of its own with Richard Jewell and Eric Rudolph. And look, we do true crime episodes every week also. That's like the perfect mix between sports and true crime that eventually we're going to pop the lid on, Ben, and have a discussion about here.
Okay.
The Centennial Park bombing, but there is a lot to it because I don't know if you know the whole story, but it's very, very, very tangled. But in this moment, this was still about Michael Johnson. It wasn't like, we had a bombing in Centennial Park and Michael Johnson's running tonight. This was still very much like the main attraction at the '96 games.
And I do know a lot of that story because I did watch recently, not too long ago, the Manhunt Deadly Games
great
series on Netflix. miniseries.
It was great. That was great.
And did have a tie to Birmingham too, which is also why I kind of was aware of it beyond the actual Olympics as well. So, yeah, we'll definitely get into that at some point. It's pretty crazy story. But if you haven't seen that Manhunt Deadly Games miniseries on Netflix, we do highly recommend that as well. Kind of ties into this. But Michael Johnson. So going into this, we knew about Michael Johnson. He was the fastest man outside of the 100 meters, obviously a little bit longer distance than the 200 and 400. But he had some success in the past. Now, I don't know if you really remember his first Olympics in Barcelona, Mike, because I know he really came on the map in that Atlanta Olympics. We were kind of aware of leading up to that with like the World Championships. But before that, I don't know if you knew what happened in 92.
I have no idea what happened in 92. I just know going into 96, he was like the guy. You were very well aware of Michael Johnson at that time.
Well, in 91, the World Championships, he won his first world title in the 200 by over 0.3 of a second. So he was a big name going into 92. Well, in the 92 Olympics, which is in Spain, right, which was overshadowed by the Dream Team, Johnson and his agent both got food poisoning at a restaurant in Spain. This was 2 weeks before the Olympics began. He lost a bunch of weight and strength. He was a favorite going in the 200-meter, but he didn't even get out of the semifinal heat. He finished 6th in the semifinal heat, didn't even reach the final.
Well, it shows you how fragile this stuff is with the training and everything like that. Like how much razor thin of an edge you have that it could all be lost based on just 2 weeks of food poisoning.
Yep. He did go on, though, to be a member of the 4x400 meter relay team, which did win a gold over there and set a new world record. So he did leave Barcelona with one world record. And then shortly thereafter, in 93, he won the U.S. title in the 400 meter and followed it with world titles in the 400 and the 4x400. So he started to kind of come around there in the early 90s. I don't remember him as much early on. We were both younger anyway, so maybe that's why. But it was in 95 when he finally won both the 200 and 400, which no other male track athlete had done at a single major meet event in the 20th century. So he had all that going into it. Could he do it on the big stage in the Olympics in Atlanta in America? That was the backdrop for this race.
Yeah, that's a nice little nugget you threw in there. Imagine being him and having to wait 4 years now to redeem himself.
Great, I know, man. It's so tough when it's Olympic.
I know, man. And getting the motivation to train just as hard and to imagine when he went to. I wonder if he ever went to a restaurant ever again.
Probably.
Seriously,
I'm
man.
sure at some point he did, but I mean, could you imagine that throwing you off?
Yeah, wild, man.
So he goes into 96. He was 28, and he'd been running very well going into this already. So not only was he the favorite, he was in peak form. The biggest thing about him were the gold racing shoes. Those were the shoes that really caught everybody's attention. That's why I said I think he might have been most popular in pop culture, Mike, because of those shoes. And I don't remember any. I mean, obviously Jordan, but I don't remember any athletes outside of basketball, maybe I don't even know baseball, that had their own kind of shoe that you recognize with an athlete.
Yeah, gold shoes, and his running style was very unique as well.
Yeah,
very stiff and upright.
Yeah, it wasn't long strides like you see with a Usain Bolt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And those two things, I think, and the fact that he was just ripped, man.
Yeah.
Ripped, unique running position, the gold shoes. It's just it was one of those things where if you're racing against this guy, he had the gold chain on too, man. It's if you're racing against him, he might have you before you even leave the blocks kind of guy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Kind of just psyching you out completely because he had it all. He was the best.
Yep. And he had set the world record not too long before this, a few weeks or a month before the Olympics. He had set the world record in 1966. So he was the man going into this. And the 400 meter was the first race, Mike, the little bit longer run as well. And this is a guy that came in, didn't have the world record. It was held at the time by Butch Reynolds of the U.S. I don't know if you know Butch Reynolds. I don't. It doesn't sound like a track name, but.
It does not sound like a track name. You're right. It sounds like a guy that drives a truck.
Maybe a guy that was out shooting in the rifle competition, possibly in the Olympics, maybe. But not him. But Butch was actually in this competition too, by the way. So I think he's a little bit older, but he was actually in this competition. But this race really, I mean, you talk about some of the names that were around him. I didn't really recognize any of them that were competing as they went through the lineup. And I don't know if you did, Mike, but he was clearly the one guy on the stage that you knew, okay, he's the guy I'm watching.
Yeah, it was one of those things where just so everyone knows that's like maybe doesn't remember or wasn't around in 96. It wasn't a question of whether he was going to win or not. Like, I think everyone who was going to win, it was a matter of how impressive was the performance going to be, kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
I remember that, Ben. Do you remember that? Like,
Yeah, I do.
You kind of knowing he was going to win, but you had that, you know, I still remember, and you're going to call me a weirdo, Ben, but I think the record he had to beat in the 200 meters was 19.66.
Yeah. That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
And his time in this race was 19.32. I still remember those numbers.
Yeah, that's the 200 meter. So
That's the 200 meter. Yeah. I think the 400 meter, like, everyone knew he was the best. I don't know if people thought like, hey, he could break the world record kind of thing.
Yeah, and I think you kind of have more notable runners in the 200, right? The shorter the distance, I think the bigger the names, right? Just because they're more high-profile events.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why the 400 wasn't as you didn't recognize as many guys. Going back to this and watching it again, but Michael Johnson got off to a good start, and really, I mean, it was a very, again, like you said, it wasn't a matter of can he win it, will he win it? It was just by how much, and he won it by nearly a second over Roger Black of Great Britain and Davis Kamoga of Uganda. He set a Olympic record for this one, Mike. So no world record for this race, just the Olympic record.
Yeah, just an Olympic record, and cruising to victory. By the way,
indeed, yeah.
I don't know how it works. Like if he knows he blasted away the field in this race. Now remember, he's got this race on the 29th and the 200 meters on the 1st. Like, does he leave a little in the tank because he knows he's going to win? How does that work? You know,
I don't know if I've heard him say that or if they asked him about that. I would imagine you give it all in this circumstance, but I guess knowing the 200 meters will be the tighter race coming up in a couple of days, maybe you do save a little. I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah, but he was either way dominant performance.
Dominant performance indeed. So for that one. So 2 nights later, he comes back. It's 200 meter again. Sage is set. He has a chance to do what nobody else has ever done before, and competing in this 200 meter. This one was the one that had a few more names in it because you had a couple guys that he had actually competed against before, and I think actually been beaten by at some point. Frank Fredericks, right? That was the name of his probably his toughest competition. I think a guy had beaten him, maybe not this year in '96, but at least in the previous year or so.
Yeah, Frankie Fredericks.
Frankie.
You remember that name? I remember that name. Yeah. He's the only guy I recognized his name when they were going through all the competitors here in the 200 meters. But this was just so again, to put things in perspective. I know we like doing it on this podcast a lot, but I think it's important. This was the race everyone was watching. So I think most people watched the 400, but the 200 was like last week when we did the Michael Phelps episode, right? Where I said like everyone was watching that 8th gold medal race. Like, this is the race everyone was tuned in for, the 200 meters.
Yep. And it was him and Frankie Fredericks kind of back and forth in a lot of different races, Mike, like over like, I guess the 3, 4, 5 years leading up to this. The guy, he was the guy that he beat. Frankie was the guy he beat for his first world championship in 1991. So you go back and like this was kind of a bit of a rivalry at the time between these two guys. But it was Michael Johnson, and dude, he was flying in this race. And this is the one I think, not only was everybody watching it, like you said, but this is the one everybody remembers because of the world record. As you mentioned, he had 19.32 world record, and everybody that you kind of talk about or listen to kind of describe this event, or anybody was there, anybody on the call, like this is one of the all-time performances in the Olympic history.
Yeah, because he wasn't. There was he was gonna. I think people knew he was gonna win this race. But I think it was a little bit of a surprise how much he won by, going to what Ben's saying about how epic the performance was. And I think as we get farther away from this performance, as far as U.S. track and field goes, it becomes even more impressive because of all of the different transgressions that these United States track athletes have gotten caught up in, involving performance-enhancing drugs. I think this only enhances Michael Johnson in that world. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so too. And the fact that like a lot of his times have held up over this, almost 20 years. I think that's a part of it too. But, the other thing about this is during the race, he actually strained a muscle in his leg, which prevented him from actually going for his 3rd gold in the 4x400 meter relay. So like you mentioned, like it's just such a fine line in these events, especially for these runners to be able to do what they're doing. and to win multiple golds, and he wasn't able to do that in this one. He won the 2 that never had happened before, but couldn't win the 3. And that was kind of his issue too, I think, is he dealt with a lot of injuries, I think, during his career. Like we saw it afterwards. He had in the Sydney Olympics, he was dealing with an injury too, where the 200-meter final, he got hurt. Like there was a lot of things during his career that just kind of hampered him. And I think that's just, part of running at that level and putting your body under that kind of stress, which makes even, the fact that he was able to do this, put everything together for a week or 2 weeks, whatever it was, over the time of his, the heats leading up to that final, makes it even more remarkable that he was able to pull that off.
Yeah, I'm glad he did because, between the food poisoning, the freak food poisoning stuff, the getting hurt, the injuries like you mentioned, no one could ever take away from him though, like these 2 nights in Atlanta. And he was the most popular athlete in the world during that time period,
Yep.
Everyone knew Michael Johnson. Everyone was talking Michael Johnson. And I'm glad that he stayed healthy and no food poisoning because
Right.
we got to witness like a truly historical sporting event those couple nights.
But in 2000, to just kind of put a cap on his career, so he got injured in the 200, so he couldn't actually defend his 200-meter title. He was going against Maurice Green, who was a big name at the time too.
Oh, yeah.
And he did actually win the 400 though at Sydney, so he was able to compete in that. So he brought his gold medal total to 4. Also, with that 400-meter win, he was the oldest Olympic gold medalist in any track event shorter than 5,000 meters at that time, age 33 when he won that one, Mike. So
wow,
another big one. And then the last nugget, he was the anchor again of the 4x400, the one he won in 92, couldn't compete in because of the injury in 96. Here to kind of finish out his career, he wins it, the gold medal, along with Alvin Harrison, Antonio Pettigrew, and Calvin Harrison. But, Mike, later on, you mentioned the drug scandal. That's the third thing you think of when you think of great track performances over the time. Pettigrew and Jerome Young, who actually ran in the heats, didn't actually run the final, were both found guilty of having used performance-enhancing drugs. So that was enough to have that stripped, that title stripped from them.
They must strip a lot of medals in track and field if they strip them every time someone fails a drug test.
Yeah, I don't know how prevalent it is now. Is it still bad? I know this era is awful, but I don't know how bad it is now. Pretty rough, though. But, it's kind of a sad story because Pettigrew, I think Johnson was pretty upset with what happened, obviously, because he actually returned his gold medal and having no fault of his own, had to give that back. But Pettigrew admitted that he did cheat in order to win, did agree to return his gold medal. But I don't know if a lot of the pressure of this led to it, but Johnson even spoke out about feeling betrayed and stuff. But Pettigrew ended up eventually committed suicide in 2010.
Wow, that's a shame.
Yeah. So that's kind of the history of Michael Johnson. But those 2 nights in Atlanta were 2 of the biggest nights that I can remember. That Johnson competition, Mike, I don't know where it ranks for you, but like when I think about U.S. Olympic performances just in my lifetime, like things that I've just witnessed and remembered and like remember them being so special at the time. I mean, this is up there. It's got to be, I can't give you a ranking off the top of my head, but it's definitely top 5, probably top 3.
Yeah, I mean, the only other single athlete performance I can think does better is Phelps that I've seen in my lifetime.
Right. Yeah, and I just think the Dream Team, I mean, not a single athlete, but just watching those guys play.
And you had some good moments with the gymnastics as well.
True. Yeah, exactly.
But nothing. And Katie Ledecky, I mean, I think she's too dominant for it to be interesting, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
She's crazy, man. She's a great athlete.
She is. So that was a big night. But 1996, Michael Johnson, first time anybody's ever won the 200 and 400 meter. We'll be watching a lot of racing, a lot of sprints, track and field, a lot of events coming up. Tokyo Olympics. We're doing this as part of our lead up to the Olympic coverage, which starts here in just a couple of weeks. On NBC, we'll have the coverage, and we'll probably be talking about these events at some point down the road, but hopefully we'll get to witness history ourselves. We're going to put this up on our website, distantreplaypodcast.com. We'll put it on Twitter, Instagram, and you can also find us on YouTube. We'll put this episode along with all of our episodes up there as well. True crime, documentary recaps, and then events, games. We'll put them all up there on YouTube. Please subscribe and rate and review.
Absolutely. Keep them coming. We love the feedback you guys give us. And until next time.